All right, so today we're going to continue our lectures on film. So far we've talked about how urban centers have been portrayed and how we've seen these different movements in urbanism and the ways in which they're using different genres to push a certain narrative on what the city actually means. We started with the cabinet of Dr. Caligari and seeing how the modern city was used as a backdrop for horror films. Then we got into the mid-century and the 60s, and we saw how the modern city started to be ridiculed for the way in which all of them essentially look the same as glass skyscrapers. We went into the 80s, talked about urbanism, and finally we talked a little bit about cyberpunk and the idea of urban decay in line with technology. Then on Thursday's lecture, we looked at modern houses as the home of villains in a lot of films, and how the modern house, as glassy as it is and as transparent as it is synonymous of a new type of villain, a villain that is very manipulative, that is not obvious, that has secrets to hide. But this week we're going to be looking at a reflection of our own profession in film and how the architect has been depicted in film historically. What does the outside world think of us, and why do they think that way? Why are certain characters made into architects even though the movie has nothing to do with architecture? What is it about our profession that makes it a popular choice for certain genres? Today we're going to be looking at a bit of a stereotype. This movie is called The Architect. It's a bad film, I'll say that ahead of time. It has like 30% on Rotten Tomatoes, but I'm showing it to you because it's almost a satire of what people believe an architect to be. And I want you to think about all of the historical references that they're going to be making, either with what the architect himself is saying or with the things that he is creating, to start questioning, why do people think this about us? Now, just right off the bat, this is the movie poster. Pretty cool poster, in my opinion. I think the text could use some work. But we see that the architect's hand, right, is using a compass. And this is not the first time we see the architect's hand as an active character in our lectures, right? We've also seen that the architect's hand has been present in the idea of city planning. When we look at Le Corbusier's plan for 3 million or his plan to tear down historic Paris, there is the iconic photograph of the architect's hand over the city itself as a symbol of how the architect literally has their hands in the city. Every building that we design is a very small portion of the master plan, or in this case, the architect is responsible for the entirety of the plan itself. And keeping that in mind, the fact that Le Corbusier was sort of a dictator when it came to architecture, and he dictated where everything was going to go, exactly how it was going to be, and he saw this house as a machine for living, I want us to think about the architect in this very bad movie in that way. All right, so I'm going to be skipping through a couple of scenes. There are lots of them. We might not get through all of them today. When we come back on Thursday, we'll be looking at other films. I just prepared this one for today since I did not know how long the Neon Museum stuff was going to be. And then we'll discuss as we go along. All right, so a general synopsis of this movie. We have a couple, a British couple, and the woman, she's pregnant. And so they're looking to find a new home for their new family, right? And they see this house that's in the YouTube video there, Hatch House, and she's fascinated with it, and so she decides to find who created that house in order to commission them a home for her and her own family. So that's where the movie's sort of going to take off, and then as we go through it, I'll summarize some other things.
The architect, Leo Sullivan. I saw a house that he designed at 299 Fulton Road. Are you Leo Sullivan? Who am I speaking to? Thank you.
Really?
I just love the house on Fulton Road.
Thank you. Here it is. We call it the Hatch House. Wait,
You're here all alone?
the firm's transition. I apologize if I sounded cryptic on the phone. Mrs. Stoughton died unexpectedly 3 months ago, and left a lot of creditors.
You was your partner?
Leo's role was more on the business side. As it turns out, my confidence in him was misplaced. I'd be so glad if you liked the Hatch House. I had a wonderful plan, Putnam Hatch. Anytime I've ever done anything good, it's because I've had a wonderful client.
What makes a wonderful client?
Someone who inspires me. Yeah? As an architect, I have the job of transforming hopes and dreams into wood, glass, steel, and concrete. But if the dreams aren't there, there's very little I can do. There will never be a great architect without a great client. I can tell by your style you're a creative person. You appreciate the process.
Yeah, I do.
It's very satisfying when a client gets as excited as I do.
Do all architects start by drawing?
Many prefer the computer. I'm old school. With a pen and paper, I'm free. I could redesign the entire city of Paris in half an hour.
You mentioned your father was an architect.
Called himself an old-fashioned modernist. The modernists had this absurd idea that you could heal the world through architecture. Of course, that's impossible. Nobody expects architects to have grand visions anymore. What a shame.
All right, I'm gonna pause it right there. So what do we think of our architect character so far? What are some general personality traits that he is displaying so far?
Really artistic.
He thinks of himself as artistic, yes. Pompous,
A little arrogant.
arrogant. What else?
And whimsical.
A little whimsical. So we see that he's dressed as a stereotypical artist with his little scarf, right? He's trying to be this image of what the perfect architect is. And the things he's saying are all things that we've talked about. He talked about redesigning the city of Paris, which coincidentally is the same exact thing that Corbusier was proposing. He talks about how our craft is no longer respected, how the modern world does not understand architecture and its art. And that is a common sentiment that many architects have, but it's not necessarily something we tell a client. So again, we are seeing a stereotypical struggling artist version of the architect as this genius that is being restrained by the world around him. Now the rest of the film is essentially going to follow the journey that they take when they're designing her home, and her husband is going to get involved, and we're going to see certain tensions begin to arise, not just from an architect-client standpoint, but also from a personal relationship standpoint. So I want us to start to think about why the architect is being portrayed as someone that is perhaps coming between the relationship of two people.
Miles.
I just love the way you combine vintage and contemporary.
Thanks. Miles, I'd like to meet my husband also.
Mark Moss.
Right, the house at 299 Fulton.
Thank you. We call it the Hatch House.
Same after the client.
That's traditionally how it works. Whatever you build here will be called the Stone House.
Oh, Mr. Hatch must be a wealthy man.
People assume that interesting architecture is expensive, but it's not necessarily so. There are a lot of new and innovative materials out there.
Sir, how would you describe your style or your influences?
Influence is a difficult subject for me. I try to avoid it. It'd be a nightmare if I started to think about it. Just tie my hands. None of us invented the house. That happened thousands of years ago. A remarkable property.
Yeah, listen, as much as I love the old house, I feel we had a tremendous opportunity
Oh, I agree. Tremendous opportunity.
Let's say we're in a 3,000 square foot house, 4 bedroom, 3 bath, ballpark, what's that gonna fit back?
Well, it's a bit like saying you want to marry a woman who's 5'6" and 125 pounds. Many women would fit the criteria, but you wouldn't love them. And what's more important is designing a house to suit your needs.
And our budget.
Well, yes, that's one of your needs, but beyond budget, you have other needs, your hopes, your dreams. I need to learn those things. My process begins with a period of intense communication. I need to find out who you are deep down. What are your eating habits, your bathing habits, your sleeping habits, privacy needs. The more open you are, the more input I have to work with. Important consideration, will the family grow and change over time?
On the practical side, we can't just think about what it feels to call them and Drew. We've got to think of the resale value. Most people don't stay in a house for more than 7 years.
What? That's crazy.
It's true.
Again, the assumption is that innovative architecture must not only be expensive, but in practical, I find the opposite is true.
All right, so first conversation between the client and the architect. And we've seen how the couple themselves, she has an admiration for the craft of the architect, and the architect obviously likes that. But the husband, throughout the entirety of the film, is going to represent that other side. He is meant to be a caricature of what maybe us architects consider the client to be, right? Annoying, bothersome, always bringing up budget, restraining our craft and our art. Of course, it's going to be exaggerated, but we see how Miles, the architect, has already started to bring up the idea of art being placed above budget. And we saw how the husband is talking about the resale value and whether anyone is going to like what he's built if it's so customized to their lifestyle. And that is a question that has come up a lot recently with people flipping homes and thinking about renovating them in order for other people to purchase them versus the idea of curating it to yourself, which is what architecture is all about, and specifically modern architecture, which recall was was created as a way to suit our needs and change the way in which the working class and the everyday person can live in their personal home. So I think now we're going to be skipping to a client meeting.
Mike Conway, Conway Construction.
Mars architect.
And there's our general contractor in the green.
Looks like it's clearing up.
Yes, this afternoon, when the forecast is reliable.
So, this is... I want you to know that Drew's contribution to the design has been crucial. She has been my muse. Parking garage is here. You enter through the main doorway here into a floating stairway space. That's a design idea inspired by Drew.
Can you really build this on our budget?
I think that's a question for Mike.
I have no idea what this is. What's this again?
Titanium, of course.
Titanium.
Yes. A magnificent metal. Noble, mysterious, vital. Just as Kronos, the first of the Titans, who ruled over the earth, the heavens, and the sea.
You know a supplier? Send us up.
Yes. Let me walk you through the floor plan.
There are no straight lines.
Straight lines are a symptom of the new illiteracy, will lead to the downfall of human civilization.
People like straight walls. They're practical. You can put furniture up against them.
Squares and rectangles make no sense in human terms. They have a negative effect on social interaction. They don't express the rigid desires of people who are too preoccupied with systems and their means of production. The entire universe is curved. Einstein proved that.
Why don't you let me present his idea before criticizing it?
That's all right, Drew. I like clients to provide active and aggressive criticism as long as they have absolute faith in me. I find that the best work happens when everyone has an open mind. Remember, you're paying for my talent and experience. You're wasting money if you don't listen to my ideas.
All right, so where are the rooms?
The living spaces here, the kitchen spaces here, and these are the sleeping spaces.
You mean bedrooms?
You could call them that.
What's this thing that's lying here? Is this a wall?
Yes. It's made of quiet stone. It's a soundproofing material. It's thin as sheetrock, but twice as sound resistant. It creates complete separation.
Complete separation from what?
Your side of the house from Drew's side of the house.
Oh, I know.
I told you that dude separating things was a mistake. Well, why don't you still just build a duplex? We'll live next door to each other.
I was just responding to Drew's sound concerns and your music concerns. I think you're making more of this than was intended.
All right, Mike, ballpark, what are we looking at?
I've got 1,000 questions before I can give you a solid number. I'd have to say at least 500 a square foot.
500? That's over $1 million. Are you out of your mind?
Mike, if you have 1,000 questions, wouldn't it be good to get some answers first before making wild guesses?
Where are the load-bearing walls?
Loads are being transferred here, here, and here.
I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but it would be more efficient to stack.
It would be more efficient, but they wouldn't be happy living in them.
Now's the time to make changes, folks. It's cheaper to use an eraser on the drafting board than it is a wrecking ball at the site.
Can't allow the engineering to dictate the building's full. Structure has to accommodate design.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Miles. Send me your final bill. I will take care of it.
What?
Yes.
No.
Yes. Come on,
Just
what's up?
first pass, nothing set in stone.
Stone would be cheaper.
Most people find that what they want is 50% over the original budget.
What we want.
This is what we want.
Mike and I need to get together, go through all these questions. There are always less expensive alternatives if need be. I find it's better to negotiate than pound my fist on the table.
This would save you a whole bunch right now.
Well, those rooms would be prisons for the people to live in.
I'm sure that Miles can come up with creative solutions that.
All right, we're gonna stop that scene there, and I want us to turn to the plan very briefly on the house itself. What kind of architects do you think inspired the filmmakers to create this as the modern prototype, or the ridiculous modern prototype for a home? Whose ideas do we see in this model here? Yes.
We see Frank Lloyd Wright's Golden Circular.
Yes, we see a little bit of Frank Lloyd Wright. Did anyone recognize the staircase? Yes. Yes, we do have some Corbusier ideas. Remember, he thought of the house as a machine for living, and he always had his top floors overhang over the bottom floors, which were usually only the garage, maybe a little sink to wash your hands, and then the staircase to go up into the actual living areas. But the staircase itself, that floating white staircase, what famous Brazilian architect proposes that idea? Oscar Niemeyer? All right, we did talk about him last semester. You all should know him. That famous floating staircase is very popular in Brazilian modernism, right? As we start getting the international style and the ideas of Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, Gropius recorded in the book The International Style, it is then distributed all over the world, and we have Brazilian architects pick it up, and that floating white staircase is pretty synonymous with Brazilian modernism. And lastly, the material of the house itself. Who are they referencing there? Titanium cladding. Yes, Frank Gehry. Frank Gehry, we also looked at famous decon architect, wealthiest architect in the world at the moment as well. Frank Gehry is known for his use of titanium panels, which happen to be very expensive and are usually used in a more commercial or public building. They're not usually used in a residence. So it is a little bit ridiculous for the architect to be proposing this to his clients. And then I want us to turn to the plan itself. Whose ideas are we seeing here? And do you think that this is something that an architect could actually come up with, or do you think this is just for the sake of comedy? And again, we see the architect's hand in the image.
The spiral shape kind of reminds me of Antonio Gaudi.
Yes, we have a little bit of the Art Nouveau, the expressionism of Antonio Gaudi. And the architect talks about the movement, right? And he talks about the universe being in movement, and therefore a home for an individual should also have movement to it. What famous expressionist modernist building that we talked about last semester was literally a depiction of the universe. And it had all these sweeping curves, and it was a great example of expressionist modernism. All right, you guys need to get studying. The Einstein Tower. If you recall, the Einstein Tower was created to showcase all of Einstein's principles, the movement of the universe, relativity, and it had a really symmetrical floor plan, but when you look at it in elevation, it had all of these sweeping curves to it. Now, when we talk about the plan itself, the architect talked about suiting two very different lifestyles, right? And we already see him starting to come between the two of them. He proposes a side of the house for Drew, the wife, and then another side for her husband. As far as the walls go, though, which architect proposed this idea of the walls not having to follow the structure? The free plan is what he called it. The free plan, the free facade, the pilotis, the roof garden, and the ribbon windows. 5 points towards new architecture by who? Yes, Corbusier. Corbusier famously did propose that our walls should not have to adhere to structure. Now, interestingly, in this case, and it's a movie, they don't necessarily show the most accurate thing ever, we don't see any structural supports here. In fact, the contractor is arguing with the architect about these load-bearing walls, which none of these are thick enough to be, and we also don't necessarily see a regulated grid going on here to have that happen. But those are where the ideas come from. They are basing it off of Corbusier's vision of the wall being able to be free from the structure, not have to be these straight lines. All right.
You're just making stuff up.
Well, let's put about Upton, Hudson, and Grace.
It's like a law firm. Upton Hudson and Grace. What happened? Something simple like Jane.
That's pretty Jane. Plain Jane and average Jane.
Now.
Wow. Wow, it's fantastic, Miles.
Let me ask you, can you paint it?
The titanium. Why would you want to do that?
I'll take down the road, for a change of pace.
That's insane. It's beautiful. It has a 100-year warranty against corrosion.
Just more silver than I thought it would be.
I love it.
Gary?
Who? Abigail.
Yeah, that rolls right off the tongue.
Oscar.
Oscar? Wow, middle school wasn't hard enough. Jeff.
Jeff is not a name for an adult.
Jeffrey.
And Jim.
Do you want her to hate us? Is that what you want? If you want to show the world that you're creative, sweetheart, do it in a way that doesn't harm innocent bystanders.
Is that what you think I'm doing?
Kids want to fit in. They don't want to be different.
What
isn't as conservative and unimaginative as the father.
Oh yeah, what if he is? What if he's actually quite capable of dealing sensibly and prudently with practical matters? Have you seen these change orders? These extras added by your genius, and costs keep spiraling upward just with this fucking staircase.
Why do we always do things your way?
We don't do things my way, sweetheart. We do them the right way, with research and planning.
Plain, there's all this logic, but it always ends up your way. You argue with me until you wear me down, and I give in.
You know, something's wrong. That's what it just. Sometimes I wish I could just reach inside your head and flip a switch. You know, just change your perspective. But I guess, you know, we bring different things to the table. It's like partners, right? I'm good at making money. You're good at spending it. I'm good at making calculated, informed decisions that yield positive results, and you're good at making.
All right, enough of the husband. All right, so clearly we're seeing here that it's a metaphor for the idea of the architect and the client, right? She calls him unimaginative, restraining, too logical, and boring, right? And she's enamored with the ideas that the architect is bringing to the table. She likes what he's proposing so far because, again, she's supposedly the muse behind this house, which we'll later find out more about. Let's see.
How did the relationship work between architect and client?
Truly inspired. A wonderful collaboration. Great chemistry between architect and client.
You obviously have no experience. Your construction drawings are just pretty pictures.
You're not even using the latest set. These were revised.
You changed them so many times. I don't even know what I'm building anymore. This is completely unprofessional. Let me tell you, I am not losing money on this job based on your incompetence. My advice to you is learn how to work with real life.
Looks like the chemistry between architect and contractor isn't quite as good.
Construction is very stressful. We're using some very unusual materials for residents, titanium, for example.
Seeing the staircase is impressive.
It was a true collaboration. I was his muse.
Who his muse?
Stuff like that.
Society needs a good image of itself. That's the job of the architect. If a client wants a house designed, most likely says someone, but conscientious architect will ask first why this house is needed. What is its place on there? The architect may conclude we don't need this house and walk away. That's why I don't have a lot of clients.
There seems to be conflict between you and the contractor.
To a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
You're not staggered between doors and things like tomorrow Conway walks off the job and it's cost is out of control, Miles. It's like you're just fighting and then go whatever the hell you want.
Cost is very simple. It's materials plus labor. You want a $5 million house for $1 million. How's that my fault? Will we pay for it myself?
What are all the extras?
Essential details.
You said less is more.
Less is only more when more is no good.
And then these stairs, I'm thinking about they're too dangerous without a hand.
A handrail. Can you imagine how ridiculous that would be?
I'm saying it's dangerous. I can't believe the building department would even allow it.
They won't. Creativity is stifled by an overzealous concern for safety. We will put in a temporary handrail and remove it after inspection.
Isn't that illegal?
It's your house, not the city's.
Just want me to list this wasted space.
Wasted space. There is a purpose to
If
beauty.
we fill this in, we add 2 rooms.
You don't need 2 more rooms.
Don't tell me what you've been so incredibly arrogant.
If I could choose between honest arrogance and critical humility, I choose honesty. There's no reason to change.
What do you do? No. You think you can prove anything by drawing?
For drawing to cool beans faster and there are no lines. Is this what you want? Bisect this space and create 2 rectangles?
Yes, great. What's wrong with that?
For you, maybe nothing, colon, you're a rectangular man. But for Drew, who's fluid and vivacious, whose spirit is spontaneous and free, she can't live in those rooms.
Do not talk about my wife's right hand.
We're crossing a line.
Again, there is a line, straight line, a line in the sand, a line that can't be crossed.
You know what? I'm not paying another dime
understand the need for his services.
When I figure the amount of time I spend on a project, it works out about $15 an hour. I feel like a poor seamstress.
Do you want a real reason I put a hand around him?
Huh?
It makes it very difficult to catch yourself, you fool.
Alright. So Miles uses the famous phrase, less is more. Who says that? Which of our four masters of modernism is known for less is more? It's not Corbusier. It is Mies van der Rohe, yes. And who says less is more? Robert Victor, yes. So we're seeing they're grabbing inspiration from a couple of different architects. The correct phrase that Mies used was less is more, but only when you distill more into less. So just having something and calling it minimalist because you didn't put the work into it would not go by what Mies van der Rohe believes in. He does believe in a grand idea, lots of information, and you have to distill it down to its most simple elements. And this is a common fault that a lot of architects, students, people have, is they'll create something and say, oh, it's minimalist, it's contemporary, but it's really just a lack of work, right? There really isn't a lot there. There is nothing that is being distilled. Anyways, that's just one of the phrases that's used in this instance. But if you're catching a couple of different things, there's been lots of change orders in the house. They've changed the sets several times, and the budget continues to spiral past what the client has wanted. So at this point, we're seeing that the architect is taking on more power than he would usually be allowed in a relationship like this. We're going to skip forward a couple minutes. So Drew goes to visit him one night at the construction site. And one last thing I forgot to mention. Miles says that he doesn't really have a lot of clients. And for whatever reason, that is something that many architects take pride in, the idea of only having a select few because you are so exclusive and because your ideas don't really cater to everyone. It's not a successful business model. If you look at the architects' dust in Arizona, they win nearly every single project that they submit to or every single competition. But they've only built, I believe, 4 to 5 projects, and that's about the extent of the work that they put out there. They do create other things, right? They do architect of record things, shopping malls, shopping strips, like everyday architecture. But on their website, if you go on it, you won't find any of those projects. They pride themselves only in those 4 to 5 residences that they feel actually speak to who they are as architects, and that's common practice. A lot of firms will not put their full extent of work, they'll only put what you want them, or what they want you to see.
Who designed the Hatch House?
What?
Why doesn't Putnam Hatch know you?
What are you talking about?
I just met him. He doesn't know you.
That's not true.
Why do you have the keys to his house?
Why are you asking all these questions?
I don't know who you are. I don't know what's going on. Did you or did you not design that house?
We all worked on it together.
Who's we?
Sullivan, my father, me.
Colin.
Great news. We don't need him anymore. The house is almost finished, and the bank will make sure it's completed, even if Tom stops paying.
I thought you'd be a little more sympathetic and a little less ambitious.
I'm sorry, you're right. You can tell pretty selfish. You're contemplating making a big life change. I'm worrying about finishing the house.
seen people come and take photos and finish the story.
Made the cover of Art in Architecture.
You can build a career out of that.
I thought you had a career.
Could be better.
This is your first house. So
We'll make a great team, Trey. Maybe we could live here together. You, me, and baby. Oh, yes, don't look at that. It's not.
This graduate design project of 2002. Oh.
Drew, I'm sorry, I had to get the house built. It's a good design, Drew. Please.
I've had a long time to think about it.
Okay, I told you guys it's a bad movie, but actually. Alright, so, what we've just gotten revealed to us is that this is Miles' graduate thesis, right? So this is a house that he's had planned for a long time. This is a 2016 movie, so 14 years more or less. And to date, he hasn't really built anything. Alright, so we're seeing this idea of, again, struggling artist, this genius in this modern world who hasn't been able to build his ideas out. And we saw that when he first proposed the home to Drew and to her husband, Colin I think is his name, they weren't really on board with it at first, and that's because Miles is essentially manipulating them the whole movie into thinking that this is their dream home, when in fact the whole catch of the movie is that it's actually his dream home, and Drew is his dream woman, and he's been pulling all the strings on this, hence the architect's hands on the compass, to make all of this happen. Alright, so Drew grabs backhoe, and she starts destroying the titanium on the house.
Painted the titanium.
That's gonna void the warranty.
Alright, so she paints the house, paints titanium house, who are also for modernist, is known for being very particular about their clients, not changing anything about the house once it is fully designed. Franklin Wright, remember that he famously nails all the furniture to the ground. He came back to the Roby house to see how his project and his baby was doing. He realized that they had moved the furniture around in a way that he had not prescribed, and so his next step was to nail that dining room table to the floor so that they could never move it and it would be used as he intended. Right, so it's not a stretch to say that some architects are a little bit overbearing and they want to have a lot of power over how their clients live, but generally speaking, that is of course going to be an exaggeration. And then finally, to end the film in these last couple of minutes, they do get back together, they have the baby. to get his dream house, finally pop up. Who drew a sketch that looks just like this? Or built a house that is a caricature of this? Who said less is a bore? Robert Ventori, the postmodernists. And remember, the postmodernists were against modernism by the 1980s and 90s because they felt that it didn't truly speak to what society was at the time. They felt that they were just rinsing and repeating the same thing over and over again, glass towers, and they proposed we need to create an architecture that speaks to the current culture. And to them, that oftentimes meant exaggerating or creating, again, caricatures of things that we all know, including the house. And if you recall, the Bonaventure house, that big green house with the oversized chimney and the staircase, looks a lot like this. It looks exactly like Denise Scott Brown and Robert Venture's sketches. So we end, interestingly, with postmodernism trying to think over modernism in this film. Now again, I told you this is a film just to get started. It is bad. When we come back on Thursday, we're going to look at some real films and we're going to look at how they depict the architect. But I want you to keep this one in the back of your mind because it does lay the groundwork for a lot of the stereotypes and depictions that we will be seeing again. I'll see you guys on Thursday.